Welcome to the Victorious Souls podcast with me, your host, Danielle Burnock, that lady on the internet who loves you. From DanielleBurnock.com, love yourself from survive to thrive, connecting you to the love that heals. Today, I have with me Katrina Robertson. She is a financial advisor who served on a jury where things got messy. She also is a wife and a mom of 5 grown kids, advocate for those without a voice, and the author of the book, Juror number 11. Thank you for being with me today, Katrina.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the opportunity just to kind of spend some time with your guests and with your listeners, really.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Katrina?
Well, everybody always usually leads the answer to that question with their profession, um, which is kind of a shallow definition of somebody, I believe, but I am a financial advisor. I've been doing this. In fact, I'm getting messages right now on my little group teams as I'm talking here. Today's my 16th anniversary here with the company I work with.
Well, happy
But
anniversary.
but beyond that, I'm been married to my husband for almost 27 years. We've got 5 children, 2 biological, 3 are adopted. One we actually adopted as an adult,
Oh, wow.
2 adopted from the foster care system.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always kind of been very enmeshed and involved in the court systems for children and individuals that just really don't have a voice. Lots of volunteer roles. One major one was a CASA, court appointed special advocate, that I served as for many years. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Oh, wow. That's kind of a lot. So that prepared you for being on a jury. You were already like involved in the court
Well,
system in some kind of way?
well,
Yes
well,
and no.
prepared me in a sense that I was comfortable going in and out of courtrooms, and I, you don't normally sit on the stand as a jury member, but that's certainly where I wound up. But I sat on the stand many times in courtrooms, so that wasn't anything. But one thing that actually complicated it a little bit for me is I knew all the judges very well. So that was actually one of the complications in my whole story. So,
Wow. Well, you were on this jury. Had you been on one before, or is this the only jury you'd been on? Have you been called
well,
before?
and I don't know if all of your listeners are kind of aware of how the jury selection process works, but if you have a driver's license, you're basically in the pool for being possibly called or asked to serve as a jury member. So you get this lovely little slip in the paper that says you've been called to jury duty, and they bring in like hundreds of people all at once, and you're given all of the instructions, and you're assigned to these different panels. Some states may do it slightly different, but it's same similar concept. I'm fairly certain. And so this entire group of hundreds of people are assigned to usually anywhere between 4 to 6 months, where they are have the possibility of being summoned for a voir dire process. And I'll explain what that is in a little bit more detail. But so during that 4 to 6 month time period, at any particular time, you can receive a phone call or text or email or however they do it to say, we need you to show up at the courthouse if you're one of these particular panels. So those panels show up, then there might be from those hundreds of people, maybe 50 that show up. And then they go through this voir dire process where they then begin this lengthy questioning period to try to, from that group, get it down to the best group of individuals to uh, be able to serve as the judges on the case that are non-biased and so forth. So all that being said, I had been on jury duty before, as far as I'd been called down. I had never gotten to the point where I was actually one of the chosen jurors to serve on a trial. So
Wow.
this was
That's
my
so you're,
first.
what state are you in?
Arkansas.
Arkansas. Yeah, they do
Yes.
that different in Michigan. We don't have like a period of time. I've been summoned for jury duty a few times, and I had to go down a particular day and spent the whole day there, and either I got chosen or I didn't.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
that
See,
was much
so
simpler. Yours is much more
yeah. So yeah,
involved.
you're actually kind of have that possibility for that 4 to 6 month period where you could be called in. So actually, in this particular, uh, you know, I think it was a 5 month period. Um, I was called 3 times, to come down to the courthouse, but I was only selected, to serve one of those 3 times. Yeah.
Well, tell us about this experience. You served on this jury. What kind of a trial was it? And share with us your experience because it got messy.
It did. It did. So it was a murder in the first degree, whereas was the charges. And it was a 60-year-old woman, piano teacher, never been in trouble before, had shot and killed her husband.
Wow.
Her uh, defense was self-defense. We were told, up front that it would most likely be a 4 to 5 day trial. So that was one of the questions that was asked during voir dire was the fact that it's going to be 4 to 5 days. Would that um, cause any of you to not be able to complete the entire trial? You already have flights out somewhere, or whatever. So, I mean, there's always the, jury duty, I think, to the average person is kind of like nobody wants to serve on jury duty. It's kind of like, um, kind of a burden kind of thing. And, I'm an extremely busy individual and professional and mom, and I had some very stressful things going on in that particular point in my life that I go into in my book. So, did I want to serve? Initially, I mean, no. I mean, when they said 4 or 5 days, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't, just spur of the moment, like just disappear for 4 or 5 days and neglect my family and work. But I kind of and I go through my thought process in the book. I was like, you know what, this is a civil responsibility, and it's very, very important, and juries play a critical role in our justice system. And it really, I was like, it's kind of an honor to be selected and a huge responsibility. You are having to make a decision that's really going to completely
Affect
change
someone's
the
life. Yeah.
trajectory of someone's life. And so I was like, you know what? I can do this. You know what I mean? I'm a
So in
very
Arkansas, do they let you say you just don't want to?
um obviously if you say that you don't want to, that's probably going to cause the different during the voir dire process, it's the different counsels for the defense and the prosecution that are asking all the questions and stuff. And if you are just real vocal that I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, well, that's you're probably going to get way down at the bottom of somebody that they would choose to select, because who wants somebody on the jury that simply doesn't want to be there? But no,
Because
you
in
can't
Michigan, you
use.
can't say, I don't want to. You have to
Right. Yeah.
prove that you can. And you
Exactly.
have to have very
Exactly.
specific extenuating circumstances. Otherwise, they don't care if you want to or no.
Correct.
You just
Correct. Yeah.
have to.
Even, I mean, there were individuals who would say, I've got to be able to pick my kids up at this time and this and that. And none of those were, they took note of that. And I know what they were doing is like, if we can avoid choosing this person, then we will. But no, you can't simply say I don't want to.
Gotcha.
You can, but
It doesn't
that
matter.
doesn't get you off the hook.
Yeah, that doesn't get you off here in Michigan. It's like too
Right.
bad. And then you would, I don't know what it is now. When I was called before, my husband served on a jury once. I mean, something like $11 a day or
Oh
something
yeah, yeah.
pathetic. It's like, really?
Yeah, it's inflation. I think it's brought. Well, I actually know exactly what you get paid because uh do I give um a little bit of a teaser here, or in that one of my uh, repercussions is I was required to pay back all of the jury fees. So yeah, I knew that calculation of exactly what it cost to pay a jury because, but because it wasn't just the jury members that served on the trial. And again, yeah, and if you get chosen to serve, it's a higher pay than if you just show up and aren't selected. But, again, there was like 50 individuals that showed up. So yeah, I got to put the bill for all that.
Oh, wow. So you ended up in contempt of court. What happened with that?
Right. So
And we hear that on the TV and the movies. Oh, you're going to go in contempt of court, and they bang on the thing. So what all does that mean? How does that affect people?
right. So contempt of court means you did not follow the court. A lot of times the word court, it's substitution for judge. The judge is the court. Contempt, so you're in contempt of the judge. You did not follow a judge's direct orders. So that's what contempt of court is. So everybody know, just like we mentioned at the beginning, during a trial, if you're on the jury, you're not allowed to talk about it, even amongst the jury members. Like when you're in the jury room and stuff, you can't talk about it. You can't talk about the case, anything about the case. They drill into you. Don't talk about the case out. Because we weren't completely sequestered until it got to deliberation. We went home at night. Don't talk about the case, and they say don't research the case. Well, that I didn't have any problem with that. I mean, after 4 days of sitting in a courtroom listening to uh, testimony after testimony and evidence after evidence and argument after argument, I knew more about this case than I know I could have dug up anywhere. So that wasn't an issue. But let me kind of back up. If you're familiar with how trials work, um, how they work is prosecution gets the first go at like opening statements. So you have prosecution, and then after that, defense gets a turn at opening statements. Well, then prosecution gets another go at opening statements, and then prosecution then gets an opportunity for all their witnesses to come. In this particular case, there were 4 prosecutors, 4 state attorneys, and only 1 defense attorney. So I immediately, right there at the beginning, was like, gosh, this seems like not equally fair. Like, why does the state get 4 separate attorneys to take on different aspects of the case and all that, and defense only gets 1? And then why does so the prosecution, they had 17 witnesses. So 17 witnesses of basically arguing or saying the same thing over and over and over. She shot and killed her husband. That was never up for debate to begin with. The charge that
We're
was
not arguing whether or not she shot and killed her husband. We're
right.
arguing whether or not it was self-defense, right?
Correct. And all of these witnesses were just experts in, oh, good grief, like gunshot wounds. And I don't know, but it was pretty arduous having to sit. It took about 2 days for the prosecution to get all their witnesses in. And there was lots of emotional manipulation going on. Things like they keep a blown up picture of the victim's autopsy body while they made arguments. And it's like, is that necessary? You know what I mean? Like, they're just trying to play on your emotions. So then after 2 days of prosecution witnesses, the defense gets their turn. They had 14 witnesses. The state objected to all but 2 of them, and it was all sustained. So almost none of the defense witnesses were allowed to speak.
Why were they disallowed? Were you
We
in
weren't.
agreement with that, or no?
Well, and so here's where my problem as a jury member comes in. We are tasked with the responsibility of being a judge in a case. We are not allowed to ask questions. We are not allowed to discuss. We aren't allowed to know what those witnesses were going to testify for, nor what the objection was to their testimony. I realized that this whole jury system is very much these people are too ignorant to understand law, so we are going to spoon feed it to them as babies, and they are to only listen to what's told them. They are not to ask questions. They are not to think for themselves or think critically. We prefer they go with groupthink, and just do as we say. And unfortunately, that's not my personality. I'm a very analytical, critical thinker, and so then it got time for closing arguments. And again, it's the same thing. Prosecution goes, defense gets a chance, and then prosecution gets to wrap it all up. So it just seemed very,
That seems
um,
opposite of the
well, and
foundation of
so
our judicial system. Like they say, innocent till proven guilty.
correct.
So
So
where
that,
it seemed like it was guilty till proven innocent in the case.
well, that was, and so, and I absolutely, I'm one who walked in with an innocent until proven guilty. The argument, um, for doing it that way is that because they are innocent until proven guilty, the prosecution gets double time to prove they're
Mm.
guilty. Does that make sense? To
Oh,
me, it doesn't.
I guess.
But that's the,
I
but that's
understand
the
English and I understand the logic. I don't know that I deem it fair.
correct, correct. And so I'm somebody who I really, I like to know people's stories, who they are, what kind of person they are. And during this 4-day trial, I really knew very little even about the defendant, other than she shot and killed her husband.
16
And
times according to them, or told 16 or
yes, oh
17
my
times or whatever.
good gracious. And I knew absolutely nothing about the victim other than he was shot by his wife. There were allegations that he was an alcoholic. There were allegations that he was abusive, but any testimony to that was not allowed. And I had significant problems with that.
Yeah, I do,
Um,
even though I'm not on the jury. I'm like, I mean,
yeah,
if that's
and
like,
it really,
what was
I
her
couldn't
cause of defense?
understand.
What did she even say? Why was she defending? I would,
Well, so the the and again, I haven't even gotten to what my contempt of court was, but I'm trying to. And that's one of the things why I wrote the book, is I wanted people to kind of walk for a minute in my shoes on where I was.
mm,
Um, but so the argument behind disallowing any of that, and I'm trying to show both sides here for not allowing any of that testimony, and it's like character testimony, because okay, so the guy was an abusive, angry alcoholic. Was he being abusive, and was her life in danger in that moment on that day? Um, and it's kind of like that's what they were trying to prove, is the situation, circumstances on that particular day. Was her life really in danger? My argument is, okay, so maybe it wasn't specifically on that day, but if he had a prior history,
mm-hmm.
um, I could absolutely see to where she believed in her mind that her life was in danger due to prior history.
Oh, definitely
Uh,
with domestic abuse. That's
correct,
prevalent. I would
correct.
interview many
So,
people who've been through that and have escaped in other ways, and the
right. So,
elaborate plans sometimes they have to go through to escape.
right. And it was able, so one of the witnesses that were able to um, testify for her as an expert witness was a counselor who specialized in PTSD. They were able to argue that, she suffered from PTSD, but they were unable to uh, comment on that PTSD originated from abuse by her husband. So it just,
So
anyway.
it just came out of nowhere, huh?
She had a hard life. That's all we can say. She had a hard life.
No.
Um, so anyway, I'm kind of like, gosh, why is everybody okay with this? But anyway, so after everything had been done except for closing arguments, we had gone home that day, and like I said, we knew nothing about this victim. And I again, I'm thinking through everything and I'm like, they said we can't research the case. What if I just tried to find out something about this victim? So I quickly just typed his name into a particular search engine, spent a total of not even 5 minutes. Nothing, I was deliberate and not like going full on
Mhm.
research mode. I was deliberate in not doing that. Nothing came up, and I was like, Katrina, I'm going to have to trust that the system is the way it is for a reason. And I've got to go in there and deliberate based solely on what is presented in the courtroom. And that's exactly what we did. But we went into deliberations and we ended up determining not guilty on first degree murder and ended up going with the lesser charge of second degree murder. But after we were done with our deliberations, and it was a very grueling process, and I really, um, I'm very vulnerable and transparent in the book of how difficult of a process it was for me to, again, based solely on evidence and testimony that was given in that courtroom, to even though my heart and my gut wanted to go one direction, the evidence showed something else. And to get to a place where I had to utter the word guilty on another human being, it really kind of wrecked me. It was really, and I was very vulnerable in the jury room, and I'm very vulnerable and transparent in the book. But so then when we were done with all that, I made the offhanded comment to nobody in particular. I said, I don't know if it bothered everybody else as much as it bothered me that the majority of the defendant's witnesses weren't able to speak. But, I said, I'm just really curious about the victim, and I attempted to find out more information about him. I said, I wasn't able to find anything, but I said, it just bothers me that we don't know more about him. That was that. We went out into the courtroom, we issued our verdict and sentencing. It was 100% unanimous. I breathe a sigh of relief, leave the courtroom, go home, say, you know, thank goodness that's over. Well, 3 days later, another jury member went back to the courthouse and filed a juror misconduct complaint about me.
Mm.
And the defense attorney, the attorney for the defendant, grabbed hold of that complaint, and he's the one that pushed for contempt of court charges against me and asked for a mistrial.
So
Um,
did the verdict come with guilty or not guilty?
for my contempt.
No, for the woman.
Well, so that's the thing that was so kind of additionally bizarre about the whole thing was, like I said, we came back with a not guilty verdict on the charge of first degree murder.
Oh, so guilty on second degree.
On
That's what they,
guilty on
okay.
second. But
Okay.
and it was the defense attorney that was pushing this contempt of court and mistrial. But by him doing that and a mistrial being granted, he basically opened his client up to the ability to get first degree murder all over again. And
Wow.
so it was kind of like, what in the world is going on? Like, what is happening? So and I'll kind of put this out as a little bit of a teaser in that a mistrial never actually happened. So you'll have to read the book to find out what happened.
Wow. So what happened to you with the contempt of court? What did that
um,
require of you? Did you have to go stand in front of the judge or what
oh yeah,
happened? Did they
absolutely.
lock you up?
So,
What'd they do?
oh my gosh, yeah. So I include the court transcripts and everything from all that. But when the defense attorney want said was asking for contempt of court and mistrial, this is how I found out about it. We got an email and a letter saying there's been jury misconduct. We all have to come back to court. So all the witnesses, all the jury members, all the parties to the case had to come back to court, and they sequestered all of us jury members into a room, and they had us come out one by one, and to be questioned and cross examined, and basically asking, was there any juror misconduct? Only, and I realized it was about me when I was the last one sitting alone in the room. They called out one by one everybody, and then I'm left sitting. I was like, they're saving me for last because this has to do with me. And out of all of the testimony from all the jurors, there were only two that even recalled me even making a statement. And so, I mean, it was obvious I wasn't trying to like prejudice or persuade or make art. I mean, it was. But yeah, even with that, and then I mentioned at the beginning, I knew the judge very well. And so he ended up recusing himself. So it was a different judge that stepped in to handle that hearing. So, and this particular judge was very well known in our area for just being, um, I'll keep it very professional here and just say she's harsh, very, very harsh. Um, you can read the court transcripts and draw your own conclusion. But so she did in that hearing, and it leaves lots of unanswered questions as far as how everything played out. And it's like you can really tell there's a lot of power plays going on, and there's a lot of political games being played. And it just really left a really sour taste in my mouth because it's like, I went into this whole experience thinking it was all about truth and justice. And I'm like, no, it's about power plays and manipulation and using jury members as pawns. And wow, it was
Wow,
so
how
okay.
did it make
So,
you feel through all of that? That must have
oh,
just
it was
been
awful.
so,
So
ah,
yeah, so the defense attorney ended up, I mean, when he had me on the stand and I mean, he slandered me. He told lies. He made accusations that was, and I'm from a small town and I'm a professional, with a, small business. You know, and to have somebody slander you like that and it be put on the front page of the local newspaper, I mean, it was absolutely devastating. I'm somebody who my character is literally one of my most valuable assets I have. And to somebody to attempt to completely discredit my character is yeah, it was. I mean, I took myself off all social media. It was a very excruciating time because like I said, I'm a financial advisor, and he accused me of like, um, you'll just have to read the book at all the allegations he made against me. He comes across as a very um, uh, slimy attorney, reptilian, but I don't have to say any of that again. You can just read the transcripts yourself and draw your own conclusions.
so
But
you have the transcripts are in the book.
correct.
Okay, so how
Yes.
did you overcome and get the victory over all these awful
Uh,
emotions and attacks against your character and just feeling just probably emotionally emasculated, as might be a way of
oh,
putting it.
yeah. And it's, emotions are, especially for women, I think just feel a lot deeper. Not saying men don't have feelings, but I think women as general, especially if you're kind of one of those empath type
Mhm.
personalities where you even absorb everybody else's emotions. I sat through that trial absorbing the weight of, I mean, some of the victims' family was there. No doubt the trauma they'd gone through of
Mhm.
losing their family member, regardless of what kind of person he was,
Yeah,
that's irrelevant.
right.
And then, this defendant and what she had gone through and went through. But anyway, all that to say, emotions can be very raw. And I lost tons of weight, really got to an unhealthy place. Um, but what I had to do was continue to stand on the truth. A lot of times our emotions are contradictory to the truth. And you begin to um, allow yourself to think your feelings are reality, that you really are a bad person, or I was also dealing with some significant issues with my children that I go into detail in the book, I really am a bad mother, or I'm not trustworthy, or I'm not a hard worker, or you start, because that's what your feelings are
Yeah, the
telling you.
self-attacking.
Yeah, and it's making that decision to um go back to the truth of, no, that is not the truth. And really to just keep putting foot in front of the other. I think sometimes we allow ourselves to get stuck
Hmm.
in those feelings. Now, I think in order to heal, you have to walk through those feelings. Like, you kind of have to feel it all. I say kind of sit in your ash pile. Um, for me, my faith is kind of my cornerstone, but to be able to allow myself to be angry with God, to ask questions of God of, like, why, during all this time, I and I know your listeners can't see it, but I got a tattoo on my forearm of a verse, Exodus 14:14, with the words "Be still" on it. And that verse, the rest of it is, the Lord will fight for you. You must only be still. And I
Hmm.
remember, sitting, and it was a fresh tattoo, as I sat in there, and the judge declared me in contempt of court. And the tattoo was still raised as it was new, and I kind of rubbing my hands over that, and sobbing and saying, God, I thought you were going to fight for me. And I, so I guess allowing yourself to feel that, but then getting back up and saying, you know what, even if, even if all this doesn't turn out the way
I
I'd
think it
like it
should.
to, but it should. And
Yeah.
and really, it's like,
Because we
and
think we know, what's best, but we don't always. Just like with our kids as
sure,
a parent, we
yeah.
think they know their best. They're 7 years old. They know what's best. They're
Oh
15.
no,
They know
they're
what's
18
best.
and 19 and think for
Well, I
sure
mean,
they
they
know
come
what's
to
best.
different things over and over again at different times. They go through cycles of it. They know everything, but they
Yeah,
don't. And so we
yeah.
can feel like that with
Well,
God too. We know everything. No, you don't.
yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, we talk about like God's will and stuff, and I think things happen in our lives that are not part of God's perfect will. I mean, I don't think,
Amen.
like, death and divorce and disease and sin are not part of his perfect will. But
Amen. I just want to
uh,
pause here for my
yeah,
listeners to just
yeah,
savor that. I agree. There are
yeah.
things that happen in the earth all over the place that are not God's will. Just because it happened doesn't mean
Mhm.
it was God's will. Why else would Jesus have part of the Lord's Prayer,
Yeah,
let your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven? Because it's not happening here.
yeah, yeah. Like, and so sometimes I think we kind of get stuck in this, well, it must be God's will. No, no,
No.
children dying of cancer is not God's will. This
Amen.
woman, this woman shooting her husband was not God's will.
Amen.
If he was an angry, alcoholic, abusive husband, that's not his will. Now, but um, true faith comes in that says, even though all
Mhm.
this is happening, I still choose to stand on the truth that God is ultimately in control and does love me. So that's where that, you hear people say that phrase, God never gives you more than you can handle. And
Uh-uh.
they say it like they're quoting some sort of scripture straight out of the Bible. And I'm like, can you point that out? Because I really think, like, Job would take offense to that.
Mhm.
I think Paul
Well,
would take
everything
offense
that
to that.
happens to people isn't something God gave them anyways.
Right,
Trauma by
right.
virtue of what it is something that we can't
Mhm.
handle.
Right. And I even look at, the story of Job, and those things that happened in his life were things that God absolutely allowed to happen. But Job, if you read it, he does not take it as a with joy. He's
No, and
very
God didn't dish
angry.
it out either.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that that quote that people say God won't give you. Well, God didn't give that. That
yeah,
was
yeah,
not from
absolutely.
God.
He allowed it. He allowed it. But but Job says, God has abandoned me. He's left me. God doesn't listen to me. He doesn't hear me. And so, you know, and God was okay with Job being angry about it. And so I think sometimes, like I said, I'm a very vulnerable, transparent person, and I've had people all throughout the years, I've always been that way on my social media, like with my stories of the hard with my adopted kids and working with other kids that have been through significant trauma. And I've had people over there saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I think it's because I've never been afraid to voice those hard emotions, and people are attracted to that.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people, if they're a Christian, they feel like, well, if I'm a good Christian, I should always, be joyful and thankful and appreciative. And I'm like, eh,
Read the
I don't
Psalms.
know. The Psalms, exactly. Lamentations, to lament, to kind of
Yeah.
like grieve, and we don't allow ourselves to do that. The trick, though, I guess, or what I would say is key is you can't stay there. You can't get stuck there. And again, tattoos obviously became my therapy during this time. And some people have convictions or strong opinions about that. And I'm like, that's fine. You can do you. But at the day after, when it was all said and done, when I finally had my final personal hearing for the contempt, I went and got a tattoo. And again, your listeners can't see it, but if they look me up, you'll see it. But it's of a phoenix,
Mhm.
because the phoenix is the symbol of kind of rising from the ashes.
Amen.
And then you'll notice on the cover of my book, I'm wearing a purple dress, which is actually, well, I obviously wear purple a lot, and that is the dress I wore to my hearing. And my phoenix here has a lot of purple. And if you read the story, you find out there's a reason for that. There's significance in it. When I was in just kind of in these depths of just sackcloth and ashes, if you want to go there. And a friend, um, I was like, I don't even, what do you wear to a hearing, and she sent me a picture of that purple dress, and she said, Katrina, wear purple. It's the symbol of royalty, and you're a child of the king. So put it on and claim it. Um, and so that just became, my thing. So I just, you know, and so that's my kind of advice I just leave people with is my my story is unique. There's not too many people have sat on jury duty and it turned into this big huge quagmire of a mess and wind up facing I looked at the possibility of jail time. Um, in fact, my attorney told me up to a year, which you want to talk about the air being sucked out of the room.
Yeah.
But so not everybody's been through that particular thing, but we all have significant trials we go through, huge
Mhm.
storms in our lives. Everybody has a story of something where they felt like, the earth opened up and swallowed them,
Yeah.
or maybe you wanted the earth to open up and swallow you. I don't know, but and so it's just don't forget to rise. Curl up and cry if you need to, but stand back up.
Yeah.
Um, so, and that's why kind of the subtitle of the book is uh, a memoir of the broken justice system and rising from the trials of life.
Rising from the trials of life. Yeah, because you go into more than the jury situation in your book. You share about your kids because you've been through a lot of things with them
Yes, yeah,
also.
some pretty tough stuff with my kids, and and kind of I went into the foster care and adopt journey with a very kind of sunshine and rainbows perception of, you just give these children, um, love and boundaries and guidance and a family and a support system. And love is going to, cover all their trauma and make them successful individuals. And uh, it was having to face the harsh reality that unfortunately love does not fix all wounds. Um, because just like us as children of God, um, we have a choice to make in this exchange as well. We have to choose to accept his love and grace and forgiveness.
Mhm.
Um, we have to make some of those choices. God, I did everything I could for
Mhm.
these children, you see. But there comes a point where now it's their turn to
Mhm.
take everything that they've been given.
Yeah.
Um, and it really gave me a lot more insight into God's love. I mean, like, how dare us say that God doesn't love us and hasn't done enough for us? In the same way of when I look at um, what all I gave for my children, and um, now none of them have ever said, that I they've never accused me of that. But I felt like they have, just because they've not taken hold of anything and used it to help overcome their trauma. I mean, does that make sense? You know what I mean? I definitely go into that in the book, that
Well, it's like they
um
have to take ownership. It's not
right,
so much that love
right,
failed, because God is love, but Jesus died to bear our sins, but if we don't take it,
yeah,
if we reject that, so we
right,
have to take ownership of it
correct,
as well. It's
correct.
like love is not magical. It's like,
Well, but we
we
want to
just like
believe
that.
it is
Yeah,
sometimes.
but it is powerful.
It's powerful,
It
absolutely.
can do the healing that you
You
have
know,
believed that, but it takes two. It
correct, it
takes two.
does. And and that's kind of again, kind of one of my things that I like to leave people with is you can pour everything you have into somebody, love somebody with everything that you have, and they can choose to walk away from it. Don't stop loving people. you
Amen.
know and that's there's, it's kind of like that Martina McBride song. You can pour everything into your heart and soul into, whether it's like a business or a project, and it all fall apart. Keep building and creating anyway.
Mm.
um you can be
Sounds a
married to
little bit
some.
like that Mother Teresa quote. She has one, I don't remember the whole thing, but it's like, people will be ugly, love them anyways. People
Right,
will do
right, and I
this,
think,
love them anyways. People will do
right,
this, love them anyways.
yeah, yeah, Maya Angelou has one as well that's similar, that and love looks different in, like right now with one of my children. The love is creating some boundaries.
Mhm.
That boundaries, absolutely, in an attempt to try to um get them on the
Foster
right
taking
path.
ownership. Yeah, to
Right.
take, for them to take
So
ownership. You have to say, this is your yard over here. This is your yard. See the
exactly.
fences? And they're like,
Yeah.
no, but I like that yard over there. No, this
Yeah.
is your yard.
Right. And you try to say, well, that yard over there, you're going to get electrocuted if you go in there. I don't believe you. And well, you're going to have to learn the hard
Oh,
way, I
that's such
guess.
a
I don't
good
know, but
example right there. It's like, and that's where faith and taking ownership has to come in. And we have to, it's a personal thing. We have to do it for ourselves. We can't choose for other people.
yeah. But it's just, you have to, so it's like, I, I've had somebody asked, who has been like an inspiration to me, and I couldn't really think of any one person, but really it's anybody who has gone through. I love reading memoirs myself, and it, almost 9 times out of 10, memoirs are written because somebody's overcome something.
Mhm.
But it's those people that have had something destroyed or taken away from them, or whatever it is, but they chose to not stay bitter or angry or stop loving people or whatever. It's no, it's they kept doing whatever it is that caused them to get hurt. Now I'm not going to be serving on jury duty again, but
Been there, done that, got the
right.
t-shirt.
So
Oh yeah, I can appreciate that. Yeah, memoirs are about people overcoming. I have
right.
one too. So that's what drove you to, or led you to write your book, was to
Well,
help people overcome in their own lives as well?
Well, that seems to be the response that I've gotten from it. I've really, had extremely, I was kind of surprised at the response I've received of the people who have said, how much of an encouragement it's been to them, which I'm like, no, but really, like I had mentioned, I've had people over the years saying you should write a book, you should write a book, and kind of like, not really interested, don't have time for that. Well, then when the whole trial thing happened, I was like, okay, fine, I'll write a book. So that's and part of it was, I think telling our stories is important. So
Mhm.
many, it can be a scary thing to do because, it's so personal. And
Oh,
you,
yeah.
when you put it out there on kind of a public platform, you obviously are going to open yourself up to criticism and attack. And when it's your personal story, it's kind of like, can you just be gentle with it, please? This is, this is me I'm putting out there, but you're going, and so you kind of have to have a level of courage to do that. But I
Oh,
think it's
yeah.
important
Hmm.
because we learn from people's
Yeah.
stories. And I think we learn as well from telling our own story,
Oh,
rather
definitely.
than just stuffing it away and trying to just forget about it and move on. Um, no, tell it if that's just writing it down. I think you learn from it.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I shared at a writers conference once, and I
Uh-huh.
spoke on how writing a book will change your life, the writer's life. Because we know that
Correct.
reading books changes our life, but writing one changes the writer's life. People don't really
Right.
realize that. It's a big undertaking to write
It
a book.
is.
It's a
So,
lot.
it is. It's a lot of work, and people have some sort of misconcept or perception that if you've written a book, you're somehow like making all kinds of money. And um, I'm
I laugh
spending
because
a
I
lot of
know.
money. I know I'm doing that, but I'm like, no, there's literally millions of books published every month, and I can guarantee you most of them are paying to have their books published. But anyway, like I said, I was a little bit, I didn't like really my purpose was not to encourage people. I it was simply to tell my story.
Mhm.
But then and I was very intentional when writing it. Like I use no names in the book. There's no names. And I was very intentional. Like I didn't set out to try to villainize anybody in particular. That wasn't my goal. And I really, I say broken justice system, but I tried to leave it a little bit open-ended to, maybe you come across as I really was the problem in the system. I leave that open. I don't, it was simply to tell my stories, but I was then surprised that by me telling my story, that the feedback I was getting that it encouraged people. And I was kind of, and I didn't realize that, because my story is kind of unique, but they were able to, they were like, you know what, I've been going through some really hard stuff in my marriage, or some really hard stuff with my kids, or some really hard stuff health wise or business wise or whatever. And reading your story of just rising each day was encouraging to me.
Yeah, or
Um,
dealing with the frustration, the being
mhm,
villainized. There's certain commonalities of emotions and behaviors
mhm,
that we share. So you
right.
shared that you may have gone through it differently with your circumstances than they're going through with their circumstances, but we're all human and
Right. The
we share
emotions are
so
still
many
there.
commonalities.
Yeah, the emotions are the same. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I would never, I've had numerous people reach out, find me on Facebook or whatever, and I've had like three in particular, like literally start off their dialogue with me. Um, my what I'm going through isn't anything compared to what you've gone through, and I'm like, hold up, stop right there.
Stop comparing.
Yeah, I'm like, what you're going through, you are having to bear the weight of 100% on you. You know what I mean? What I went through does not diminish at all what you are feeling
Amen.
and going through.
Amen. Trauma is
Um,
personal.
Absolutely. So I said, don't try to diminish what you're going through, So, that being said, you look you look back at, I think as we get older though, we tend to, as we go through more and more trials, at least me personally, things that were hard for me at one time, I'm able to kind of breeze through now because it's like, I've been through worse, but I would never,
Well,
ever,
that's resilience that you have
yeah,
built up
uh-huh,
through your healing.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
going to the gym. First time you go, like, oh, I got sore muscles. But if you keep going
right,
and build
yep,
yourself stronger, that's
yeah,
one of the things that I do in my workshops is building resilience. If we build resilience, we don't just get it by going through stuff. We have to
yeah,
work on the healing and to build the resilience, which you have done.
yeah, yeah. Get through it somehow, some way.
Well, before we tie this up, is there anything you want to make sure our listeners know?
I think we've kind of covered everything. I've been able to, share things that have helped me. So I think we've covered everything. And I guess, what I will mention is one thing that shocks a lot of people, and I do have it at the very end of my book of you know what kind of got me in trouble in the whole ultimately in the whole trial and repeatedly in some of the stories in the book. It's just my uh, always being drawn to the hard to love, the uh, individuals that don't have voices. So anyway, long story short, I've actually developed a friendship with the defendant now. So they're like, "What? You've got a murderer as a friend?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And she has her own story.
Wow. So how
And
can people connect with you and where can they get your book?
well, the book is on Amazon. I think it's in other places, but that's the easiest place to go. Juror number 11, that's hashtag 11, um, should come up then, but the subtitle is Memoir of a Broken Justice System and Rising from the Trials of Life. It is in right now. I've got the Kindle, well, and I don't know when this will publish, but it is on ebook, paperback, hardback, and then I also did an audiobook. Some of your podcast listeners might be audiobook listeners. So it is out there on that. Full disclaimer there, I narrated it myself and I am absolutely not a professional. It was a huge learning curve to figure out all the audio requirements and getting it to where, Audible could uh, accept it and that kind of thing. But it was important to me since it was my story to tell it in my voice. So it is available there. I don't have a website or anything, but people have been able to find me on Facebook. Katrina Robertson. There's not a whole lot of us out there. If you put Arkansas behind it, you'll probably find me.
Well, I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And you're on Instagram too, right?
I am. I am. I don't frequent it quite as often, but
Okay.
well, I say I don't frequent it. I don't post as often, but I I kind of lurk around a little bit.
All righty. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us today and
Yeah,
encouraging
absolutely.
us that we can rise from the ashes.
Yes, yes, you can.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us today. Until next time, mwah, I love you.